Welcome back to Soil and Water Conservation course. In this session, we will be discussing the part 2 of water resources. We will be talking about the deterioration of water resources and their implications. Water is essential to crops and animals. We need water to survive. It carries nutrients around the body. So by giving importance to our water resources, it is one of the key to environmental sustainability and it creates economic opportunity. So let us know what are the reasons or causes behind the deterioration of water resources and their corresponding implications. Causes: the natural hazards. The major natural hazards in the Philippines is the biophysical conditions which act as the predisposing factors for watershed degradation. So natural hazards, these are the natural phenomenon that might have a negative effect to human, animals, and environment. These are the following. For water quantity and quality, monsoonal climate patterns result in seasonal variations in rainfall, the risk of too much rainwater at some times of the year and too little at other times. In the Philippines, we enjoy tropical climate that is for the most part hot and humid year-round, but can be roughly divided into dry season between November and May, and wet season between June and October. Although in recent years, due to climate change, summers have been extending into June to July. The natural climatic cycle, such as the periodic El Niño and La Niña effects, mean that years of lower or higher than average rainfall can be expected on a periodic basis. El Niño is a phenomenon resulted in reduced rainfall that lead to dry spells, droughts, and stronger typhoons. La Niña is associated with wet condition. It brings more rains, slightly cooler temperatures, and moderate to strong tropical cyclone activities. So sa dali nga pagkastorya, El Niño means super hot weather, La Niña means too much rainwater. Floods. Following periods of heavy and prolonged rainfall during the passage of an intense, slow-moving tropical cyclone or typhoon event are a natural hazard even in areas of excellent forest cover. So kung sa Cebuano pa, baha. Pag natural phenomenon na jud ang muigo, bisan ang mga area nga naay trees, pag mag-moist na ang soil, mao jud na hinungdan sa pagkatumba tungod kay ang ihang roots is malata man. So matumba ang ato mga crops during flooding. So many rivers already contain considerable volumes of sediment from past severe storm or events in transit along the river system. Hence, control of erosion upstream will have little short and medium-term effects on their sediment discharge. Sa sigi ug bagyo, ang mga soil nga ma-erode, like for example, during flooding, then mopadulong siya sa river system. Ang mga sediment or soil is magkaanam-anam og katambak ditoa. Pero, og nagapractice na ta sa soil and water conservation, so ma-filter na ang tubig, then gamay na lang nga mga sediments ang mopadulong ditoa sa river system. For soil erosion by water, monsoonal rains with high-intensity storms, steep slopes of the mountain and hilllands. Tungod kay bakilid man ang area, so prone jud siya sa erosion, bisan hinay lang ang ulan. Hilabi na ug ang area is walay cover or walay crops nga nakatanom. Geological instability associated with recently formed, in geological terms, hill and mountain landscapes such as the Sierra Madre and Mount Pinatubo, exacerbated by periodic earthquake and volcanic activity. So kani nga mga mountain have a steeper slope and it explode. So naay lava emission that destroys crops and other living organisms. Soils with low resistance to water erosion. Like for example, soils that contains volcanic ash, silty soils, and topsoils with low organic matter. Next, for soil fertility decline, strong leaching associated with the country's general high rainfall. So because of heavy rains, ang soluble materials or nutrients, instead nga ma-store siya sa soil surface, mopaingon na hinuon sa ilalom nga dili na makonsume sa crops. Soils which are strongly acid and or with low natural fertility. So this can be tested by the pH paper or pH meter. pH paper is the most cheaper and easier way to measure the pH, but pH meter provides more accurate results and color blindness is not an issue. pH in chemistry means potential of hydrogen. It is a scale used to specify the acidity and alkalinity of the soil. So the pH scale goes from 0 to 14. Ang 6 to 0 means soil is increasingly acidic, so it contains toxic minerals or nutrients that affect the growth of some plants. 7 is the neutral point. It promotes most ready availability of plant nutrients. Ang 8 to 14 is the soil means increasingly more alkaline. So it is the inavailability of some minerals that causes chlorosis of leaves or kanang magyelo, which will put crops under stress leading to declined productivity and eventually mortality. Rapid decay and mineralization of soil organic matter due to country's warm tropical climate. So paspas ang pagkalata sa mga organic matter tungod sa kainit sa panahon. Instead nga ma-store siya sa topsoil, ang majority sa nutrients is mag-mineralize or mag-evaporate sa atmosphere. So much of the nutrients in tropical forest ecosystems are stored in the vegetation rather than the soil. Hence, the soil in many deforested areas are naturally low in fertility. This is the reason why gina-encourage ang mga farmers nga dili sunugon ang crops after harvesting, aron mabalik lang sa soil ang nutrients nga na-uptake sa vegetation through decomposition. And ang crop rotation sab is very important practice aron ma-enrich ang soil fertility. The direct causes of the deterioration of water resources. So we have the deforestation and removal of natural vegetation. So nowadays, gamay na lang gyud ang nagpabilin nga virgin forest or katong mga bukid nga wala pa jud na cultivate. So overexploitation of vegetation for domestic use and commercial sale. So nanobra pod ang pag-cultivate sa area para lang makaproduce og dako nga production for human consumption and commercial sale. So, inappropriate agricultural activities. So, just like what I said kagaina, nga ginapractice atong farmers ang pagsunog sa mga crops after harvesting. So, mo na nagkataas pod ang requirements sa fertilizer sa area tungod kay dili naman mabalik sa soil ang nutrients nga na-uptake sa vegetation. Inappropriate forestry activities. So, kanang sige tagputol sa kahoy para atong isugnod or himuon atong shelter, sige ragputol, sige putol, pero wala ta nagtanom. Overgrazing. So it reduces the ground cover of the soil. Kay ginakaon man sa cows or other nga mga animals ang katong grasses nga sa area. So kung masobrahan siya, maupaw gyud ang area, then it enables erosion. Poor water resources management. So wala nagapractice og mga water conservation strategies. Unregulated land conversion. So it triggers flooding and erosion by changing the physical use of the area by another use. So for example, kung kana siyang area is agricultural land, unya gi-convert into housing. So mo na siya, naga-trigger siya sa flooding, erosion, and dako siya environmental effect. Industrial activities. So one of its example is manufacturing, production. So it triggers the global environment kay labi na tong mga emission or singaw nga gikan sa mga planta. Indirect causes, so population growth and movement into the uplands. So tungod kay nagkadaghan naman ang tao, ang uban is gustuhon na nga mopuyo dito sa upland. Ang mga living organisms nga naa dito is ma-distract or ma-destroy kay dito naman sila mag-cultivate, dito na sila mamuyo. Population growth and development in the lowlands. So tungod kay nagkadaghan na ang population, magkadaghan pod ang mga balay nga itukod and mga pabrika and other establishments sa lowland. Land tenure. So, naay batasan sa tao, dili tanan, but majority, nga kung magsaop lang sila, dili sila gusto nga i-cultivate ang area or magtanom og pang long-term nga mga crops like trees, kay tungod kay paminaw nila, muhawa raman sila, basi dili sila makapahimulos. Yun ana. Misconception about watershed management. So, dapat makabalot ta or masabtan nato where does the water comes and where does it goes. Kay para ma-apply nato ang appropriate nga watershed management conservation measures. Next is the poverty and economic disadvantages. So, poverty often causes people to put more pressure in the environment that results in a larger family. So, kung kinsa pa tong mga tao nga naka-experience of economic disadvantages is mao pa tong daghan og miyembro sa pamilya. Some of them practices improper human waste disposal that leads to unhealthy living conditions and trigger po ni siya sa water pollution. Lack of markets. Sad to say, our farmers really work hard para makaproduce og daghang food for us. Pero maglisod sila dispose or baligya sa ilahang mga tanom tungod kay walay access or lisod ang access sa market. So it leads to economy efficiency. Next is the inappropriate conservation technologies. So conservation technologies has also a negative effect in the environment pag dili nato siya matarong og apply. We have some examples, ang salt farming, very known na siya sa agroforestry. The reforestation and terracing. So need na siya og high initial capital, so medyo lisod siya i-establish. Lack of access to credit. Majority sa atong farmers diri sa Philippines belongs to the poorest of the poor. Mao nang bihira lang ang magpahiram og kapital sa ilaha. Due to lack of finance, maglisod ang atong farmer og produce og quality and quantity of farm products. Next is the limited institutional support services. Our farmers get limited support from the institution. But now, ginahatagan na sila og support sa atong institution og gihimo ng priority ang agriculture and forestry. Conflicting institutional mandates. So the Congress have the power in making laws and policies in watershed management. So underpricing watershed resources. Underpricing watershed resources contributes to the inefficiency of its use. Next is the inconsistent statutory and policy framework. The legal and policy environment in which watershed management takes place characterized by overlapping and conflicting policies. So these are the indirect causes of watershed degradation. Effects. How does a watershed affect the people? Watershed affects the people in every sphere of life. The sustained productivity of food, fuel, forage, fiber, fruit, and water by the management of vital resources of water, soil, vegetation, and phenomena like floods and drought are determined by the nature of watershed functioning. Water. In water, watershed conditions affect and influence water quality, quantity, and region. These three water parameters are vital for human and animal consumption, irrigation, industry, power generation, recreation, transportation, and in many other ways. By manipulating different watershed characteristics, the quality, quantity, and regime can be regulated according to requirement. In erosion and sedimentation, the rate and quantity of sediment produced and transported are of vital importance. Accelerated erosion affects adversely the productivity of the land, whether it be under agriculture, horticulture, forest, or grasses, results in loss of land as a natural resource, results in higher sediment production and delivery into the reservoirs, which causes reduction in the life and benefits of the reservoirs, result in siltation of channels, which cause overflows or floods, and damage to land, results in damage to machinery or turbines, generators, and other plants, and results in damage to property. In vegetation, production from all land independent upon the availability of the right quality and quantity of water at the right time, which in turn independent upon the conditions of the watershed. Production is also dependent upon the erosion rate and deposition that takes place in the watershed. Floods. This affects the people greatly. Probably, this one single item engages the attention of the people more than any other item. While floods cannot be altogether eliminated, they can be greatly mitigated by sound watershed treatments and management. Droughts. This could also be mitigated by sound watershed management programs aiming at moisture conservation and evolving sound land use programs. Consequences of watershed degradation. So in soil and vegetation, declining of soil productivity, loss of soil cover, less organic matter, less biological and nutrient activity, erosion, and global warming. In water, surface runoff increase, stream flow fluctuates, occurrence of floods and drought, decreased groundwater recharge, lowers water table, vanishing of springs, water pollution, and etc. In yield, decline yields, low productivity. So in local environment, we have the pollution, global warming, biodiversity, loss of biodiversity, and the extension of flora and fauna. In local society, migration to populated urban areas to seek job that results to squatting and malnutrition. In farming system, shift to high external input agriculture, look for species more tolerant to drought. And economy, loss of livelihood, increased cost of living, water, electricity, etc. And it leads to poverty. So in health, malnutrition, and disease. So these are the consequences if ang atong watershed is ma-deteriorate or ma-degrade. So that's all for today. I hope you learned something from this discussion. God bless you all.